Excubitor is a hybrid tower defense and shoot 'em up game where you systematically fight off waves upon waves of enemies. It sells for $19.99 and releases on Steam on Thursday, May 26, 2016. Can this mashup of genres bring some fresh life into both of them? Or will the vacuum of space devour it before it boosts into light speed? That's what I'm here to find out, but before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Let's start with the game's basics. You can build a variety of turrets in predetermined spots on the map, using power and void shards, aka the currency of the game, that you attain from your enemies. These turrets range from simple machine guns and 100mm cannons to slow-inducing cryo towers. The turrets are upgradable as well with appropriate power, and can be sold at seemingly the same price you bought them at, or at least very close to it. You do have an artificial limit on the amount of turrets you can put down due to power limits, but you can build a generator to give you more power as well. So, typical tower defense game setup here. Enemies follow predetermined paths, and those paths will change based on what wave you're in. You can see where enemies are spawning from via the minimap indicators, as well as every individual enemy incoming via icons on that same map. Most of the maps usually center around the defense of key installation points, such as your main starship. If it goes down, the game is over. Lose a key defense specific to your objective, the game is over as well. Survive long enough, however, and you'll move on to the next area. However, you're not a passive bystander this time around, as you can fly around in the Hammerhead and join the fight with 2 weapons of your choice. These weapons have a range of variety as you unlock them, from missile barrages that light up enemy ships, to flamethrowers that are able to engulf enemies in the flames of justice. Several of them do change up your playstyle a tiny bit, but more on that later. Your ship has shields that regenerate slowly over time when depleted, and a set of armor as well. You do have a boost to move you across the map, which will be used a lot to get the jump on your enemies. If you die, that's really okay, because you'll spawn with no real consequences, which I'm honestly not a fan of. While yes, things can get chaotic, and you could take a lot of damage rather quickly, death not being a threat means that you can play without a good amount of fear, and I just feel like it's unnecessary given the game's default challenge being on the easier side. You can buy permanent upgrades, and the void shards used are dropped in buckets full from enemies you destroy. Modules like armor and weapons can be upgraded along with new weapons to buy, and you can get special abilities to enhance your shields and damage, which are helpful to say the least. So, how does it play? Well, okay, I suppose. Okay, I know that doesn't really explain it, and don't worry, I'm going to go into detail regarding the pros and cons of the game. But when trying to summarize what I thought about the game, that's really the thing that comes to mind. It's okay. Not great, not bad, just okay. Control-wise, the game is again okay. There's only mouse controls here, and you have to note their implementation. Expecting bullets to fly in the general direction you're aiming and hit an enemy is actually a bad assumption here in some cases. From what I saw in the game, damage really only happens when a ship that you're aiming at is in the circle targeting reticule, at least with more traditional weapons that aren't things like flamethrowers. Now that's rather important, because in the chaos of a firefight, you may be focusing on trying not to die, only to not notice that you're not doing damage. Now, you may point out that dying may not have a consequence in the game, as I said earlier, but come on, do you really want to die? This does make things feel a little different from other games in the genre, that's for sure, but whether or not that's a good thing is entirely going to be personal preference. Personally, it slowed combat down a little bit due to me literally stopping to fire on an enemy to do reasonable damage to them. But I can't say that the controls are not functional, because they are. The one thing you'll have to get used to is strafing with a hammerhead, and the associated sliding that goes with it. It will take some time to get used to doing that, along with aiming with the mouse, but when experienced enough, it gives enough control to deal with enemies. Maybe not the most precise control, but reasonable enough. But going off track a little bit, let's talk about the aesthetic. The game looks reasonable when looking at the ship's detail and background separately, and it's clear that while it's not the main focus, a bit of effort was put into the small objects on the map, even if it's at a perspective that doesn't necessarily do the art justice. You do get some variety with maps in cold and hot environments, but be prepared to look at a lot of space and metal-looking structures, because that's the majority of backdrops here. But one of the issues that develops is when the aesthetic and the controls are combined together, and it's something that may be unique to me. When changing directions, I found that the rotation of the ship against the background caused a bit of a motion sickness effect. Now, this could be unique for me, but other games with this sort of aesthetic haven't given me a problem before. However, I have experienced it in games like Grapple. I could only play this game for about 30 to 45 minutes at a time, as the game did give me a headache and nausea on several occasions. This was instant, so anyone buying the game and finding this to be a problem can refund. So thankfully, it shouldn't hold you back on trying the game if you want, but I would be amiss to not mention it. Back to the gameplay though. The game does slowly move you into the gameplay, as you deal with waves upon waves, and introduces you to new turrets and weapons at a reasonable pace. Taking down enemies isn't as visually appealing as I might want, but it does the job, and the weapon choices are satisfying, especially when you unlock some of the later weapons. It's the sound design that could use a tiny bit more of a boost here. Explosions in particular, things are eerily quiet when you die despite blowing up, and frankly, turning off the sound during my test didn't really make that big of a difference. See, there's sound indicators when your base gets attacked, for example, but surprisingly, you really don't need them. The combination of the genres can leave a weird feeling or two as well. You're combining elements of a fast-paced shoot-'em-up with a slow-paced tower defense. This leaves you with wavy gameplay, where there's a bit of action, followed up by a lack of it. And that's not even between waves either. Within a wave, you'll get mini waves, and between those, there's some downtime. You can use this time to upgrade, but at a certain point, you've maximized your resources and what you can do. And it's only wave 3 out of 6. Now this is really dependent on the stage for sure, as some keep up the action by forcing you to move in between sections. The game really needed a start next wave now button. Granted, you want to give people some time to upgrade turrets and recover in between waves, but I found myself upgrading mid-battle, and honestly, tapping my toes for the next round to start. Yes, I could go and explore and see if I could find something I didn't find before, but it really hurts the game's rhythm in the end. I was also sort of disappointed in some of the turret choices. I mean, there's an alright variety, I suppose, but I think my major problem is with the information portion. Most tower defense games show the range or some type of value related to the turrets in question, like damage and reload time, to get the most out of the choices that you are making. In this case, they didn't give you any of it other than a generic description, and well, that just didn't sit well with me. I couldn't plan very well. The inclusion of the shoot 'em up elements, however, does present a small problem. They don't really stand out. Okay, you can get some good feelings with shooting the two weapons in series with each other, but the big problem here is the enemies themselves. You'll be fighting waves upon waves of enemies, and that's where I think one of my bigger complaints reside. Sure, some will fire homing missiles and some have larger shields, but when taking down enemies, there's not much variety other than the boss battles. Not to say that they're all cannon fodder and completely the same, but when you're in the middle of wave 4 and realize that you haven't changed your strategy up other than shoot bullets at bad guys, it sort of drains on the experience. Again, tower defense is rooted in strategy roots, and I feel this game is a bit more action than anything else. To be frank, I don't know if any specific turret choices made a difference in victory or defeat most of the time. Sure, the 100mm cannons did more damage than the machine guns, but did that choice really make a difference in the end? I'd argue in my playing, no, it didn't. Now, I played on the default difficulty, but did try the insane difficulty for reference. And honestly, I didn't find that I needed a change at the higher difficulty. Yeah, your main ship took damage easier, but strategy-wise, not much changed. Part of that has everything to do with you being in the fight. Sure, the turrets most definitely help, but you're so effective in battle that you can easily overcome any weaknesses in your defenses rather easily. That's why I was hesitant to call this a tower defense at the start of this video. Hell, there are turrets designed specifically to repair you. That gives the game some flexibility. I'll give it that. In my opinion, the game needed to play off that strategy a bit more. Some kind of enemy where you got punished for hitting them at a certain point, for example. The game at times felt like I was just playing through the motions to get to the next level, which is a slight problem. Yes, in some tower defense games you will feel a slow progression at times, but the action part here ends up negating the expectation and semi-enhancing the feeling that you're waiting on the game as opposed to being actively a part of it. Now don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the gameplay in question, even if I have a bit of complaints about it. It does enough different that it was interesting. What it comes down to is my concerns about the repetitive level design and enemy wave elements, and missing some potential there. I feel like with the right tweaks, the game could have really taken itself to the next level. Instead, I felt the game was too easy in most cases, and it felt like a grind a good amount of the time. And the reason I say missed potential is that the game in certain levels really does hit its potential. It's when the variety in gameplay occurs via level design. Take for example this level, where you have barriers you have to repeatedly deactivate, and you have to destroy specific generators on one side of the map, while your mothership is on the other side. You have to deal with waves spawning between each barriers, and now you have to balance keeping your mothership alive while still dealing damage to those generators. It's where the game upped its challenge that it so desperately needed, and while yes, I died a couple of times in these portions, that was most certainly welcomed. It required strategy of when to go all out and when to be cautious. It required timing because of the barrier's cooldown and opening. There's a couple of levels like this, and when the game pulls them out, they're fantastic. It's levels I wanted to play over and over again. In the end, what's going to cause Excubitor a bit of problems is that $20 price point. Let's be clear, games cost a lot of time and effort to develop, and I honestly think that games can be very undervalued in this generation of games. With that said, market forces dictate the price that a game is sold at due to supply and demand. And with games with similar, not exactly similar, but somewhat similar, experiences out there that deliver with a bit more of a punch than Excubitor, it may have trouble justifying that price. It took me about 5.5 hours to get a 68% completion rating in the game, and the game does have a New Game Plus mode as well, so keep that in mind if you make the decision to buy it. It is a combination of unique features, but none of them exactly shine, and that's the hook that I talk about in terms of buying a game. It doesn't have that one lure. Those levels, those very specific levels that I mentioned, are very close to that, but it's not enough for a good amount of people to bite at that price point. It's the kind of game that I can recommend at a certain point due to some of its unique control aspects and mashup of genres. But for a good amount of people, it's one of those wishlist games when the game goes on sale. Now, if you like what you've seen on screen and feel like the game's strengths are good enough for it, by all means, the game definitely has an audience out there. It is experimental in some cases, and I do appreciate that. It's good for the industry. Just be aware of the game's faults if you decide to splurge on it, because this game is a bit different than everything else in its two main genres, and all the expectation of those genres should be thrown out the window. Thanks for watching. Like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe if you want more content like this. In the description below, you'll find the Steam review accompanying this vid, along with social media that you can follow me on, Twitter, Google+, and Facebook groups. And if you want to support the channel, click that Patreon on the left of the screen. And remember, keep on gaming.